Morning Joe is angry with their mainstream media colleagues for not being hard enough on Donald Trump. Really? Let's watch.
You look at what Donald Trump is doing on the eve of the presidential debate, talking about violence, talking about bloody deportations. We're going to have deportations and they're going to be bloody. Talking about the January 6th rioters as patriots and saying that he's going to get them out of jail. Mocking, once again, Nancy Pelosi's husband getting his head smashed in by somebody that was spouting Trump talking points. We could go down the list, but he is doing that right now. And this whole idea that we see in the media, oh, well, the left wing says this, the right wing says that. The false moral equivalencies, I think, are really laid low. But this is some left-wing, right-wing thing. When you see Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, and all of these generals that work for Donald Trump saying the man is unfit to be president.
I am a little discouraged at how the mainstream media is covering the race like you are, Joe. Listen, what he said over the weekend deserves a headline this morning. It deserves a headline. It would get a headline if Kamala Harris said stuff like that.
This is hilarious to me. And this happens a lot of criticisms of mainstream media coming from mainstream progressive commentators. That, yeah, this would get a headline if it was Kamala Harris. You think this stuff is not getting headlines? Have you opened the pages of the New York Times or logged on to Politico or the Atlantic or any other major media outlet? I'm sure there are headlines at MSNBC and just like news headlines. And in fact, there are. If you look, all of the, according to them, crazy things Trump is saying or promising to do are in fact being covered by the mainstream media. So their real frustration is actually not with their colleagues who are covering these things. Their frustration is with the American people for not caring enough or not finding it automatically disqualifying for Trump, or not all of them. Obviously, there's half of America that doesn't support and won't vote for Donald Trump, but there's the other half who will or who might. It's going to be a close election. What frustrates Joe Scarborough-type people is that despite Trump's erratic statements and things that a lot of things I don't think are good. Nobody thinks January 6th was good or what he said about it is good. Hadn't even helped him. Even if you're pro-Trump, you can't argue that this was good from the standpoint of reelecting Donald Trump. Despite all that, there's enough people in this country who like his policies or dislike the policies of Democrats enough that it's still worth voting for him.
And generally tune out everything that he's saying, aren't on Truth Social necessarily, seeing his latest and greatest things. I think there is that frustration among the liberal commentators, right? Senator Claire McCaskill and others, Joe Scarborough, that this is already baked in with the American people, right? They know that this is what the former president is going to do and traffic all this. In their estimation, absolutely should his latest and greatest attacks on XYZ be leading news coverage? Certainly. And to your point, it is on a lot of those outlets. The American people, I think, they know he's a known quantity, right? In that New York Times polling that we were talking about earlier, I think it's just 7% want to know more about Donald Trump, right? He is 30% want to know more about the vice president in positions. We know what we're getting with Donald Trump, right or wrong. I happen to be on the more, Democratic side of the aisle, but, he is a known quantity, and I think that frustration is palpable among those media elites, right? I'll call them that this isn't having more of an effect with the American people. And in fact, the DNC, the Harris campaign, just released a new ad, it's called The Best People, featuring remarks from former Secretary Esper and John Bolton and others. And we'll see if that even resonates with a lot of people. We talked about it with Hannah in terms of these GOP endorsements, and if that even has an effect going forward. Yeah,
I think it'll have very little effect. Look, it doesn't help. Certainly, former Republicans turning on the party is not a good thing from a PR standpoint. Now, I would argue that the Cheneys in particular represent a very different vision of the Republican Party, one that lost out, one that Democrats and mainstream media commentators were extremely, exhaustively critical of, often for good reason. I think the Republican Party's foreign policy under those political figures was a really catastrophically bad idea in terms of the party and also in terms of global stability and security
writ large. Yep.
And it was all really bad. And pivoting away from that is a good thing. And it's it's funny to see. We now have Dick Cheney supporting Kamala Harris, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is supporting Donald Trump. You have to
this
update those.
This is a strange bedfellows election,
but
certainly heading out 57 days from now.
I mean, it's to your point that people change what they think over time, or people emphasize.
And coalitions change too, right?
Coalitions change.
And we talked about some of those shifting demographics.
Right. RFK Jr., for instance, was emphasizing some skepticism of vaccines forever, for years and years and years, and that used to be totally accepted on the Democratic side.
Alongside his strong support for the environment, right?
Yes.
And conservation, he held those two views and was particularly outspoken about those issues. One resonates with Democrats, one resonates with folks that are a little bit more populist and a little bit I don't think are strong politically, ideologically.
There's been tremendous polarization around educational attainment and sort of just trust in society. If you're someone now who trusts the expert or the elite consensus, you are extraordinarily more likely than you were to be a Democrat, to be a progressive. If you're someone who is skeptical and contrarian and thinks the elites are getting everything wrong and they don't have working people's interests in mind, you are increasingly likely to be a Republican. That wasn't always the case. It used to be different institutions where people were skeptical of, like Republicans didn't trust the school system or the media, but they trusted the military and they trusted scientists
and the FBI, and
the FBI, and now they think the FBI is out to get them.
Exactly.
And on the other hand, Democrats, left-wing activists. This is still true to some degree, but left-wing activists embrace extinction movement type stuff, right? Like limit how many kids you have, and there's still that is still prevalent on the left. But broadly speaking, Democrats have gotten on board with whatever elites are saying on those issues, which to my mind is sometimes right and sometimes wrong. I think it's healthy to have a level of skepticism and contrarianism for what the elites and the experts think, as we saw during COVID, because they're capable of getting things catastrophically wrong. But the judgment of the people isn't always superior to the elites.
Sure.
So
I mean, the greatest argument against democracy is spending an average of 10 minutes with the average voter, I think.
Exactly.
Churchill said that.
I like to say that no one, commoner or elite, is well qualified to run your life. Only you are qualified to do that. So I don't want to give more power to the people relative to the elites, but I don't want to give more power to the elites either. I want to give more power to you.
There you go.
To run your own life.
There's broad agreement on that.
Okay,
right here at this table.
That sounds good. And Tim Walz has been emphasizing the personal freedom issues, which I love rhetorically, although I really don't appreciate how he obviously governed his state during COVID, where it did not accord with that. But yet we should all embrace more personal freedom, baby. That's my message.
Amen.
All right.
A good Monday morning message for sure.
Kevin's on board. Fantastic. Well, it was wonderful having you here. Really appreciate it. That does it for us today on Rising. Thanks so much for tuning in. And I will be back tomorrow. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you later.